This podcast is the sole property of Proud Sports. Our thoughts and opinions are our own.
Yeah. They say I walk like a king, talk like a king. You can act around now, say the same thing. They chasing the fame, they all want the name. But they ain't got what's running through these veins. Say I walk like a king, talk like a king. You can act around now, say the same thing. They chasing the fame, they all want the name. But they ain't got what's running through these veins. Make way for the king.
Time now for another Proud Panthers podcast. Stephen Beck here with you as always, and I hope you'll follow along with me on X at Stephen Beck PS. This podcast, your home for all things High Point University basketball, and you can follow the podcast on X as well at Proud Panthers. Today is a recap for our High Point University men's basketball game that actually just wrapped up this evening in Hickory against the App State Mountaineers. Final score 86-78, and a tough loss for our High Point team, now moving to 8-3 on the season. So we're going to recap that with my thoughts coming up next.
High Point University, the premier life skills university, is ranked the #1 best-run college in America by the Princeton Review. Employers value HPU's real-world preparation. Students love unprecedented access to global leaders on High Point's inspiring campus. And parents appreciate HPU's God, family, and country values. Choose to be extraordinary at High Point University.
Wake up the Carolina way. Hi, this is Stephen Beck. Join me every Saturday morning for Waking Up Proud. We've got local eats, hot sport takes, and a whole lot of Triad and Carolina flavor. From barbecue debates to big game breakdowns, we've got your Saturday mornings covered. Wake up, chow down, and cheer on. Carolina mornings start here with Waking Up Proud. Saturday mornings, 9 to 11 on WSJS. The morning show that feels like home.
Back now on the Proud Panthers podcast. Stephen here with you, and made the trip back home to High Point after being in Hickory for High Point's loss this evening, 86-78 to App State. These two teams go 1-1 the past two seasons, last year, this year, in this home and home, where High Point hosted App State in the Swarm facility last year, and now the Mountaineers hosted us in their Hickory campus facility at Lenoir-Rhyne, and came away with a win in overtime today that I'd like to dive in and talk a lot about. You heard for a second here about a show that I also host called Waking Up Proud, and that is live every Saturday. Hope you'll join us there on WSJS Radio, but you can find it on a podcast form as well. And I bring that up because I had the luxury of hosting head coach Dustin Kearns, App State Mountaineer basketball coach, as part of that show this last weekend. And going into this game, he didn't make any mystery about it, really, that today's game, if the Mountaineers walked away with a win, would be their best win of the season. So after the game was over, I did want to introduce myself. We hadn't met formally in person before, and so I called up with Dustin and asked him if that was still the case, if this game was, in fact, their best win of the season. And he said, without a doubt, that was absolutely the case. But during that time, and this is why I wanted to start here, he brought up a point that I'll say I forgot. I'll raise my hand. I'll be one of the first to say, man, blame me. I have forgotten this. But I'm hopeful that our High Point Panthers fans will remember this, And I really encourage the players on the roster to remember this and acknowledge this. It'd be an encouragement from me to them. Coach Kearns said, and this is him asking the question, his quote to me was, do you have any idea what that roster, talking about our High Point Panthers, spends to form their team? I said, yes, I'm aware. We are blessed in a lot of ways. And I want to point out right here at this exact moment that our head coach in Flynn Clayman often makes mention of how blessed that our High Point Panthers program is. And with those type of blessings, with them knowing and realizing what we have, Coach Clayman has said many times over that we don't accept losing. Because of that, we don't accept losing. So I know right off the get-go, our coaching staff doesn't accept just going out and saying, oh, yeah, it was a loss, whatever. No big deal. But that being said, I bring all of this up to point out and encourage and say, I forgot this, that when our High Point basketball program takes the floor against anybody, we're going to be that Super Bowl for them. That is where our basketball program has gotten to in a very, very short period of time. We're taking on teams in the 3 losses that have experience with our program. UAB, we played a season ago. SIU, we played a season ago. App State, we played a season ago. And in all 3 of those losses, I would go on the record and argue to say that UAB and that SIU probably share the same sentiment that Dustin Kearns with App State thinks. And that is, this is our best win of the season right here. Because our High Point team, and it doesn't take the sting away from a loss. It doesn't really do anything for today's outcome to make it any better. But it's realizing that we are a Super Bowl for anybody and everybody that we play. And I say all of that to encourage our players on the roster to remember that. Because that means that you're going to get everybody, every single team's player's best shot. If you missed our live Proud Spaces as I tried to traverse my truck back to High Point, and I appreciate those that joined us on that, I made a mention there as an example of this. Luke Wilson, a beast for the Mountaineers today, spent his time as App State was on the free throw line, closing out this win for their team in overtime. He spent that time all the way down, opposite end of the floor, at our bench, jawing with Owen Aquino. I use that as an example to say, like, that's perfect proof right there. Players, other coaches, other teams, they're envious. Why wouldn't they be? They, and Coach Kearns was making this point with me after the game, they don't spend a huge exorbitant amount of money on their roster. Now, I don't know really. I really don't. I don't know what the figure is that High Point spends. The point I've already made is where I feel like we need to be, and that is where Coach Clayman lands. And that he said it. You know, if we're this blessed and we have what we have the resources that we have, we don't accept losing. That's where we got to get to. But in the talking circles, the rumors, the locker room banter and maybe bulletin board material for these other programs taking on our High Point Panthers, they're saying, hey, y'all, that's a team over there that spends $3 million on a roster. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what all these players, that's what all these other teams think of High Point. I've been very vocal many times over that there is a High Point derangement syndrome within the Big South. Like I feel like other members in our own league. They're not standing back saying like, oh man, what High Point has going on and what they bring to add to our league. That is so great. And we need to support them all we can. In fact, I think it's the opposite a lot of times. It's, we're really jealous of what they got going on. And so anything and everything that they do that is positive or that could be positive, we don't like that. We don't like High Point. And I don't know whether or not App State likes or dislikes High Point. I'm not really going to that. What I would say is seeing Dustin Kearns after the game, hearing from him directly that this is his biggest win, seeing the emotion of him pumping up the crowd and throwing his fists in the air after the win today. It's further proof that a game against High Point right now, where our program is more meaningful to these other programs than oftentimes it's not. And I talked about when we lost to SIU at home that it seemed like the Salukis were willing to push chips into the middle and kind of go all out, all in for a win. Now, App State today, I know how much it meant for them and all that they did. I still feel like it was on our end of things that led to our High Point team losing this one. I am of the mindset that we got to go backwards right now. I shared on the Proud Spaces live. I don't really feel like this is a scenario where you got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You got to start over, that you got to do anything dramatically crazy here. What I really think is that a loss like today, that was very much in reach of being a win, that we failed to close in the correct way. I feel like this game is a good opportunity, again, to say, we got to move backwards to the way we started the season. And I really felt that was the case against NJIT when we did win. And I felt like that was the case against SIU. So like really now we're 3 games where I feel like we've kind of gotten away on particularly the defensive side of the floor from where we started the season. And I know that the first opening game against Furman is a bit of an outlier. It's an opening night. You never know what you're going to get. There's no film study out there, and everybody's ready. Everybody's chomping at the bit. But part of that is my exact point. For our guys on the roster, I feel like they need to mentally realize, okay, this is their Super Bowl. We need to fire out of a shotgun just like we did against the Paladins to start the season. You can't come out flat. Yes, there was 9 days off. Can't come out flat in the first half. Tough getting the shooting going. Halftime, same way. Can't come out a little reserved on that end. You got to come out of a shotgun just like we did first game against Furman. And on the defensive end, where I feel like we got to go backwards to where we started the season, we got to get back to forcing turnovers, getting deflections, and getting steals. Right now, you're not seeing as many of those numbers. I sadly, hard as just a general fan covering High Point's team, or any team for that matter in college basketball, you don't really get to see a deflections number. But I know that is one that our High Point staff in-house pays a lot of attention to and focuses on. For steals, we do have that number. We only had 5 today. And turnovers, we were only able to force 12. But where we started the season, where we were early in the year, those numbers have dropped. They've fallen off some. Now, I don't know why exactly or how that happens. What I just know is the brand of basketball that we were playing at the start of the year, where we were deflecting, we were getting in passing lanes, we were forcing other teams to make mistakes and not get into a rhythm, not get into a comfortable zone. That is where we really need to focus and try to get right. So for me, normally I would look at a game like Mary Baldwin coming up. That's our next one on Tuesday that we're also getting ready for. You'd look at that game potentially and say, hey, Tuesday night, students are at home. They don't have their the students in-house to be rowdy, and maybe coming off of this loss, just the general observer fan that may or may not usually come out, may not really be too keen on it. They're playing a non-conference opponent that also doesn't carry a lot of weight. A lot of times you look at that and it's like, yeah, that's kind of not really a game that I'm into. No, this game, Tuesday against Mary Baldwin, that's a game I'm into. I want that game. Ready and excited for that game. The reason why I want that game is because we got to get this right. And that's a get right game. We got to come out, forcing turnovers, getting deflections, getting steals, creating havoc on that end of the floor. And the opposite end of the floor will take care of itself if we also hit free throws. That was another element to this evening's game that was a self-inflicted wound. We had opportunities up 8 points late in the second half to close this game out proper. And unfortunately, we didn't do that. In part because we were 15 of 27 from the free throw line. Those are freebies. Percentage-wise, that's 56%. And App State, meanwhile, had 73% from the free throw line. For the Mountaineers, that's more in line with what you would expect. As a general High Point fan, I'm here to share with you that our team regularly has to complete a number of free throws after each and every single practice. Each player, they shoot the same amount of free throws. They start the year at a number, and they build that number as the season goes. And they can't leave the gym until they've hit their number of free throws they have to. And it's in excess of 10. I don't know what they're at right now, but I think they started the season at like 14 that they've got to hit straight. That's make after make after make. Can't miss them. If you don't, might as well pull out a sleeping bag. Stay there. That is what they're doing to prepare. It just didn't get applied today. And part of that leads to not closing out the game when we had a chance. I've had questions. It was a question shared today on Proud Spaces Live. And the question was, why are we seeing more 3-point open looks? Where is this coming from? And that's got to be something that could be fixed. What's going on there? Well, I don't have all the answers. I am not a college basketball coach, although at one time I wanted to be one. Where I fall back and return to at this moment to answer that concern or that question is on comments direct from our coach in Flynn Clayman. Because after the NJIT game, I asked the question. I went to bat for fans that were curious because, again, Southern Illinois against NJIT, and now again today against App State, it appears in just a quick blink of an eye kind of thought that all three of those opponents are getting a lot of looks from three, taking a lot of 3-point shots. Today, App State hit 13 of them. Their previous high was 10. So in one of the things that I would say is, I know for a fact that Coach Clayman is a very analytical guy. He likes looking at stats and percentages and playing by those. Not a bad way to be. So earlier when I said that SIU used our game, playing us, beating us as a Super Bowl for them, and they pushed the chips into the middle of the table, kind of left it all out there. That was one of their mentalities. We're going to go out and we're going to shoot. We're going to shoot threes, trying to win on the road and get an upset. You got to have those if you're going to do that in college basketball. So that's one element of it, is that these three teams, they're shooting beyond what the analysis going in would claim that they would. And that happened again with App State today. Alonzo Dodd is the guy. Today, he missed one attempt from three, made 5. Scored 25 points to lead the Mountaineers. So part of it is that the analytics, the stats, they're kind of working against us, sadly. I also go back to what Coach Clayman has shared with me, and that is against NJIT and against SIU, he saw times of breakdown with our players. He saw places where they made mistakes. Just said it clearly. Mistakes were made by the guys. So those are things we've got to address and clean up. Now, over the 9-day time, I would have liked to have seen those things cleaned up. I feel as if there weren't tons of looks today that were just completely blatantly wide open. I know it felt that way because App State hit 13 of them and Alonzo Dodd only missed 1 3-point attempt. But honestly, I saw many more opportunities, me being there in the Lenoir-Rhyne Coliseum or whatever it was called, Shuford Arena, I can't remember. But me being there, I saw that a lot of times those shots were hit with shot clock running down, and our High Point Panthers defenders in the general area, the vicinity, close enough to have a hand up and be there attempting to force a missed shot. So some of those, again, I felt as if a little bit of that was cleaned up where it wasn't. And I divert back to what I previously said, and that is more deflections, more steals, more havoc caused, trying to get a team out of their comfort zone. Now, where we had some success today was in Terry Anderson continuing his good play. It was seeing some good, solid minutes off the bench from Yusuf, I feel like. It was having some very good passes made by Conrad, who had 11 assists in this game. So there's things here that I wanted to make sure and mention because I hate to be all doom and gloom. And those were the main things that I picked up on. Braden Hassan had 23 minutes of time where he looked very comfortable. Sadly, his threes didn't fall like Alonzo's did. Coming back to grips with the loss, figuring out what this really means in the big scheme of our High Point season. That's where I want to get to wrap up our minutes here on the Proud Panthers podcast today. For me, and I haven't spoke with any of the coaches after the game, but just for me, I feel like there's a get right opportunity on Tuesday. Mary Baldwin coming in just at the nick and right time to enforce that we've got to go backwards and start over with what we were doing at the beginning of this season and get that right first against this team. The other thing that I would like to see is I would like to see Owen and Cam get back into a flow. Just stating the facts here, the past couple games have been a tough go for those guys. Owen today, a lot of foul trouble. And when he fouled out, got his 5th foul, you could say that was a big turning moment in the way that this game ended up. But also Cam, I know in looking at a box score, he was minus 16 today. and did go 0 of 6 from the 3-point line. So they need these guys, need their help, because when they are firing and a little and more lethal as a whole team, we're more lethal. We're below our points average, where we also were on the offensive end. Now, for me, that's not, again, 78 points wasn't really something that I would look at and be like, oh yeah, if we're not scoring 90, we're in trouble. I don't feel that way if we're doing what we need to do on the opposite end. I'm just saying that it would be nice to have Owen and Cam back in good feels territory, to be able to contribute to the other guys and get their load as well. And where I also would feel like we need to appreciate is we need to take a guy like Yusuf and be appreciative of him for his effort today, because we're still in a little bit of a search here, trying to find somebody that can go to bat, go to work when Owen or Cam, maybe even Terry, need to take a rest or end up in that foul trouble just like Aquino was today. Because on the other end, Luke Wilson, the guy I mentioned earlier for the Mountaineers who was jawing late in the game, that's how much he cared about this game. He was a beast. And that inside pressure, that's a tough thing if you don't have somebody to go to bat for us and try to eliminate that as an option. And this is a completely other aside, because in the big scheme of things, I'd love to talk hunky-dory stuff like this all the time with my talking points. But man, I know there's people giving Luke Wilson a hard time for his choice of baggy tees underneath the jersey today. I'm for it, man. I'll tell you, that takes me back to some good times. 90s basketball, early 2000s probably as well. Baggy tees under the uniforms. The shorts, probably too baggy. I prefer the shorts in today's game better. Not that fashion is probably my first thing of talking about again, but just saying, Luke Wilson, he was repping like an 8XT underneath his jersey today, and was getting a hard time from some folks about it. But his play made up for it. I mean, he was tough to stop down low. But that's where I feel like we've got to have an extra person down there and go to bat. And I'll go ahead and tease this. I sat down with Caden Miller. We'll have an upcoming interview, he and I, on the Proud Panthers podcast, once we can get it up and on here in between things. And in just our time sitting together, I'm not ashamed to admit that I shared with him, like, some encouragement there. Like, hey, man, you and Yusuf and J.I., I mean, you guys have an opportunity here to go in there and just work hard, man. Just do whatever it takes, the little things, the rebounds, the bodying, the defense, do that kind of stuff, because that we really need that right now. And today was another example of that. I know that these losses they're hard and they're disappointing. This one in particular probably is the hardest to stomach for me, because UAB, we were on a clear road trip. First time out there. UAB is a good program, and we had an off night. I also know that at that time, I think there were some guys on the team, the roster, that were battling some stomach bugs and sickness and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a tough loss. Move on. SIU, again, I said it earlier, I just feel like the Salukis pushed it all in, put their chips in the middle of the table, kind of laid it all out there. And we had a bad break at the end of that game where they scored in a convert on the other end, layup at the buzzer. But today, when you're leading by 8 points, under 2 minutes to play, And I recall a play trying to close this out where Terry made a great look, go figure, an alley-oop to Cam Fletcher in the middle of a zone. I think it was like a 1-3-1 that App had switched to in this moment. That was a time where I said, okay, we might can actually escape and get out of here. And to find a way to let it unravel at the end is tough. Now, I'm not going to spend tons of time laboring on this because, again, it's to be expected. You're on the road, and it's just part of it. There was some calls. I know it. I was there. I've been very clearly told by members around me and family and things that they saw me, throwing my little fit, I'll say. But there were calls by the officials in this game, especially late and in overtime, that were tough whistles to swallow. I didn't like a lot of them, to be honest with you. But we kind of have to stomach and shoulder the blame there a little bit because we can't let it get to that. We need to close it out on our own terms, not let it get to that. So we've got a Tuesday game inside of the Quabain Center. As I already referenced, it's Mary Baldwin. Whatever a Mary Baldwin is, I'm extremely thankful for it. And the timing could be better, in my opinion. Because we've got to get back and get right. And that's an opportunity to do it. So I'm a visual guy. I think proof is in the pudding. We need to see a good, solid bounce back. And I'm going to tell you, I don't even care what the offense looks like or does. For me, it's on the defensive end. Deflections, steals, turnovers, all that kind of stuff. That's what I'm going to be looking for. If you have questions, comments in the meantime, share them with me anytime at Stephen Beck PS. And we look forward to you joining us the next time here on the Proud Panthers podcast.
Everybody can't lead like one. Is it really me? Gotta check and see my legacy like royalty, and I act like it. If you know